You probably know someone who never posts anything. No updates, no stories, no reactions. Most people assume they're missing out, but psychology suggests they might be doing something very intentional. Some people choose not to use social media at all. They don't announce it. They don't explain it. They simply stay away. To others, this can seem unusual. In a world where sharing is normal, silence stands out. But this silence isn't accidental. It's not about being antisocial or disconnected. For many, it's a conscious decision, a boundary they've drawn, a line between what they consume and what consumes them. While most people adapt to the pace of social media, these individuals have stepped back from it entirely, and they've done so quietly, without needing to justify it, without seeking validation for their choice. This behavior is often misunderstood. People assume it's about privacy or a dislike of technology. Sometimes they think it's pretentious, a way of acting superior. But for most people who avoid social media, it's none of those things. It's about attention. More specifically, it's about controlling where attention goes. Social media platforms are designed to capture attention, to pull it outward, to make you aware of what others are doing, thinking, feeling, and sharing. Every notification is a pull. Every scroll is a decision to continue engaging. For some people, this constant pull becomes exhausting. Not because they lack discipline, but because they recognize the cost. The cost isn't always visible. It's not about time wasted necessarily. It's about mental space occupied. When you're constantly aware of other people's lives, your own thoughts get crowded out. When you're always reacting, you stop reflecting. Some people become aware of this pattern early, and instead of trying to manage it, they remove themselves from it. They don't see social media as inherently bad. They simply recognize that for them, the trade-off isn't worth it, so they choose differently. Not with superiority, but with self-awareness. Psychologists describe this as selective engagement. It's the ability to choose where your mental energy goes, and more importantly, where it doesn't. Most people think of attention as something they have, but attention is also something they give away. Social platforms are designed to make this exchange feel effortless. You scroll, you see content, you react. But each of these actions has a psychological cost. Constant exposure to other people's lives triggers comparison, and comparison, even unconscious comparison, affects mood. Notifications create interruptions, and interruptions fragment focus. Endless information creates decision fatigue, and decision fatigue reduces willpower. None of this is dramatic. It's cumulative, small effects that compound over time. Some people recognize this early, not because they're smarter, but because they're sensitive to these effects. They notice when their mood shifts after scrolling. They notice when their focus is harder to maintain. They notice when they're thinking about what others think of them, rather than what they think of themselves. And instead of adapting to the noise, they step away from it. This isn't about willpower. It's about recognizing incompatibility. For these individuals, social media isn't a tool that serves them. It's a system that pulls them in directions they don't want to go. So they opt out, not because they think others should too, but because they know what works for them. And in a world that constantly asks you to be connected, choosing disconnection becomes its own form of clarity. In daily life, this choice looks simple, almost invisible. They check their phone less, not because they've set strict rules, but because there's nothing pulling them to it. No notifications demanding attention, no feed to scroll, no updates to check. This creates space. Not necessarily free time, but mental space. When you're not constantly aware of what everyone else is doing, your own thoughts have room to develop. When you're not reacting to content, you're free to create it. When you're not comparing yourself to others, you're more likely to evaluate yourself on your own terms. These aren't guarantees. Avoiding social media doesn't automatically make someone more focused or creative, but it removes one major source of distraction. And for many people, that's enough. In conversation, these individuals prefer directness, not because they're socially awkward, but because they're not used to the performative nature of online communication. They listen more carefully. They respond more thoughtfully. They don't feel the need to fill silence with content. While others are scrolling, they're observing. While others are reacting, they're thinking. They're not against connection. They're against the specific kind of connection that social media offers. the shallow, constant, performative kind. They prefer depth, slower interactions, relationships that don't require constant maintenance. And because they're not trying to keep up with everyone online, they have more energy for the people in front of them. Not always, not perfectly, but more consistently than they would otherwise. This doesn't make them better people, it just makes them different, and that difference is worth understanding rather than judging. This choice is often mistaken for isolation. People assume that without social media, you're disconnected from the world, left out of conversations, missing important information. But that's rarely the case. These individuals aren't isolated. They're selective. They still communicate, they still maintain relationships, they still stay informed, they just do it differently. Instead of following hundreds of people superficially, they connect with a few people deeply. Instead of consuming endless information, they seek out what's relevant. Instead of broadcasting their lives, they share privately. This approach has trade-offs. They might miss trending topics. They might not know what everyone from high school is doing. They might be out of the loop on viral content. But for them, these aren't losses. They're acceptable costs. What they gain is focus, clarity, a sense of control over their own attention. And perhaps most importantly, they avoid the constant pressure to perform. Social media creates a subtle but persistent expectation. To have something to say, to appear interesting, to document your life in a way that others find engaging. For some people, this expectation is motivating. It helps them stay connected and creative. But for others, it's exhausting, a constant performance that never ends. By stepping away, they remove that pressure. They don't have to curate their lives. They don't have to present themselves strategically. They can simply exist without an audience. And for many people, that freedom is worth more than any benefit social media offers. Not because social media is bad, but because for them, the cost of participation outweighs the value. Avoiding social media doesn't make someone superior, and using it doesn't make someone shallow. These are simply different approaches to managing attention, different ways of being in the world. Some people thrive in connected, fast-paced environments. They find energy in interaction. They enjoy being part of ongoing conversations. They like seeing what others are doing. For them, social media is a tool that enhances their life. Others need more quiet, more space between inputs, more control over what enters their awareness. For them, social media is a distraction, not because it's inherently bad, but because it doesn't align with how they process the world. Neither approach is better, they're just different. And not every difference needs to be corrected. What matters is self-awareness, knowing what works for you, knowing what drains you, and being honest about the trade-offs. If social media helps you stay connected, use it. If it exhausts you, step away. If you're not sure, experiment. But don't assume that everyone should do what you do. Some people need connection, some people need solitude. Most people need both, in different proportions. And there's no single right answer. The psychology behind avoiding social media isn't about rejecting technology. It's about understanding yourself well enough to know what serves you, and having the courage to choose differently, even when that choice seems unusual. Not for attention, not for validation, but simply because it works better for you. And that's reason enough.